A lot of you were on the fucking Zoom and you were doing the following, okay? Looking at your mail, sending texts to each other, what an asshole the other person is. Okay, not paying attention, not reading your stuff, and if you don't think that slows down efficiency, creativity, creates rudeness, and stuff, it does, okay? And when I found out that people are doing that, you don't do that in my goddamn meetings. You're going to meet with me. You got my attention. You got my focus. I don't bring my goddamn phone. I'm not sending texts to people, okay? It simply doesn't work, and it doesn't work for creativity. It slows down decision-making. And don't give me the shit that work from home Friday works. I call a lot of people on Friday. There's not a goddamn person to get a hold of. But here are the problems, okay? And they are substantial, okay? Which is the young generation is being damaged by this. That means they may or may not be in your particular staff, but they are being left behind. They're being left behind socially, ideas, meeting people. In fact, my guess is most of you live in communities a hell of a lot less diverse than this room. Every area should be looking to be 10% more efficient. If I was running a department of 100 people, I guarantee you, if I wanted to, I could run it with 90 and be more efficient. I guarantee you, I could do it in my sleep. And the notion, these bureaucracies, I need more people, I can't get it done. No, because you're filling out requests that don't need to be done. Your people are going to meetings they don't need to go to. Someone told me to approve some of his wealth management that they had to go to 14 committees. I am dying to get the names of the 14 committees. And I feel like firing 14 chairmen of committees. I can't stand it anymore. Now, you have a choice. You don't have to work at JPMorgan. So the people of you who don't want to work at the company, that's fine with me. I'm not mad at you. Don't be mad at me. It's a free country. You can walk with your feet, but this company is going to set our own standards and do it our own way. And I've had it with this kind of stuff. And, I come in, I've been working 7 days a goddamn week since COVID. And I come in and where's everybody else? They're here and there and the Zoomers don't show up. And people say they didn't get stuff. So that's not how you run a great company. We didn't build this great company by doing that, by doing the same semi-disease shit that everybody else does.
Welcome to another episode of the Future of Work Weekly Report. This is where we dive into the hottest topic, specifically ones that have been raising some serious question. Today, we're talking about leadership, employees' needs, and how that disconnect between them is driving disengagement and high turnover. CEOs like Jamie Dimon from JPMorgan Chase are pushing employees to return to the office, while others like organizational psychologist Adam Grant are highlighting the real keys to success: manager support and understanding your employees' needs. We're going to break this down and connect the dots. But spoiler alert, it's not about who's working where. It's about fixing the systems at the root cause that are causing frustration across the workforce. So let's start with what's at the core of the issue: the disconnect between leadership and employees' needs. We've heard from Jamie Dimon and other top CEOs who insist that employees need to be back in the office to get their work done. But there's a crucial detail they're missing. The reason employees aren't fully engaged isn't because they're not physically present. It's because they're not being supported in the right way. Dimon, as we most likely know, watching this, recently made headlines with his comments about Gen Z needing to step up and return to the office to prove themselves. More specifically, younger people.
All right, so we talked about this yesterday, the idea of return to office, and I made light of it that Jamie Dimon said a few other choice words to employees, saying he didn't really care if they had a problem with it. But I want to talk to you. It sounds like you talked to some employees. How concerning is this for JPMorgan employees that they're going to have to be in the office 5 days a week?
Well, part of this story started in the beginning of the year, around the 10th of January, when the policy was formalized. A memo was sent to employees explaining that the five-day policy would take over from the previous hybrid arrangements in lots of different cases. And as you mentioned, this week, Jamie Dimon participated in a meeting with lots of employees, and perhaps unsurprisingly, this topic was mentioned. And very quickly, almost as soon as the question was out of the questioner's mouth, Dimon told them not to waste time on it, and, as you say, used some language that is not customary for morning television.
Yeah. basically said, don't bother with an F-word petition, just to spell it out for anybody that might be confused. He also asked for efficiency. Now, that was interesting. What efficiency is he looking for? Was there any clarity when it came to that?
Part of the argument around the 5-day-a-week policy has kind of centered on a bit of a somewhat of a contradiction, because Dimon said that he felt that people were not necessarily paying attention during Zoom calls. This was one of his complaints during the meeting on Wednesday. But employees say that there is already a culture of international working together. And indeed, the petition that we mentioned spells out that lots of people do have to work with colleagues in other countries. And while the original request from JPMorgan in the memo that people, or I should say probably that the mandate that people on hybrid policies should return to the office 5 days a week, it mentions that there will be more getting things done and working together. But the workers feel that they are already working internationally. And in many cases, there is also a sense that the bank has been successful during this. So JP Morgan's share price in the past 5 years, a lot of that time, a lot of people were working remotely, has doubled. And so the argument is that this is perhaps not such a bad thing for business.
But here's the problem. If young people are being left behind, it's not because they're not working hard enough. It's because leaders are failing to provide the right support. It's a leadership issue, not a generational one. And as we saw last week, managers need help too. So leaders need to help managers so managers can help employees. And it all circles back to the customer if we want to tie it to business impact. But this is where the research of Adam Grant really matters. Grant's work shows that the real issue isn't a lack of work ethic or even presence. It's a lack of attention management or manager attention. According to his studies, productivity isn't about pushing people harder. It's about giving them the support they need to be successful in their role and in the company. In fact, manager attention has been shown to be one of the most important factors in improving engagement and productivity. The truth is, if employees aren't feeling valued or heard, no amount of office time is going to fix that. As Grant suggests, psychological safety is critical when managers actively listen and invest in one-on-ones or just hearing their employee and what they have to offer. It helps foster trust, motivation, and ultimately ties into their overall performance.
The measure of a leader's success is how much the groups they're in charge of ultimately accomplish. That means that if you fail to help people realize their potential, you are failing as a leader. When I work with leaders, I tend to see them fall into one of two traps when it comes to developing their people. One is that they're cheerleaders, and the other is that they're critics. If you're a cheerleader, you recognize people's best selves and you try to harness their strengths. But there's good empirical evidence to suggest that when we become too comfortable with our strengths, we start to use them as a crutch. And they can even become career derailers. So if one of your strengths, for example, is charisma, you are at risk for underpreparing when it comes to leading a meeting or giving a speech because you're so good at improvising and speaking extemporaneously, you may not do your homework. I don't think you just want to be a cheerleader because you are in danger of letting people turn their own strengths into weaknesses. I think the problem with critics is they often deflate the people around them. If you're constantly telling people what they're doing wrong, people get discouraged really quickly. Their motivation starts to falter. At some point, they begin to doubt whether they have any potential at all. I think the best leaders are neither cheerleaders nor critics. They're actually coaches. They see people's potential and they try to help them become a better version of themselves. They allow people to recognize their strengths, but not get complacent around them. They allow people to see their weaknesses, but not get discouraged by them. And they remind people, yes, you might be pretty good today, but you're capable of becoming even greater tomorrow. And that energizes people to want to become better, as opposed to being comfortable with where they are or completely incapable of growing from where they're stuck.
But here's the kicker. If Dimon or other CEOs want to solve the engagement and retention problem, They need to focus on this. Create environments where employees feel supported, listened to, and understood. It's not about the office. It's about creating systems that prioritize employee well-being and growth. Now, I know a lot of people will say that this is feely, soft, but we're not talking about bowing down to the employee. What we're talking about is giving them the support that they need so we can actually accurately measure if they are doing good or if they're a right fit for our culture. Only when we create this can we actually determine if they are a right fit or if they are performing to our expectations as a company. Until then, we're flying by the seat of our pants. Now, one key area where we can foster that trust is, as we mentioned, in one-on-ones. The power of one-on-ones is hard to overstate here. When managers take the time to understand their employees' goals, challenges, and motivations, it helps build a relationship of trust. Yet this is where many leaders fall short. Some CEOs, surprisingly, Brian Chesky, Howard, the founder of Rome, and a few others have openly dismissed the importance of one-on-ones, arguing that younger employees should just prove themselves, or you don't actually need one-on-ones because they're a waste of time.
So another thing I do is I will text a lot of employees and I'll call employees. If we want to talk, a meeting is not the best way to do it. I don't do one-on-one meetings really, unless it's like somebody, I don't believe in one-on-ones, and almost no great CEO in history has ever done them. Very few. Again, we can go down the list of CEOs who don't do one-on-ones.
Why don't you?
Almost every CEO did one-on-ones, and they realized that the one-on-one model is flawed. It's a recurring 1 hour one-on-one meeting where the employee owns the agenda. And what happens is they often don't talk about the things you want to talk about. You become like their therapist, but they know they're bringing you problems, but oftentimes they're bringing you problems that you want other people in the room to hear. In other words, there's very few times an employee should come to you one-on-one with other people. If they're concerned about something, if they're having a difficult time in their personal life, if they want to confide in something, they don't feel safe telling a group. But that should be infrequent. If that's happening frequently, that is a very ominous sign for your organization. So Jensen Huang says, I don't do one-on-ones because I want everyone to be part of the solution and get the wisdom. When you make lots of one-on-one decisions, then people feel like they don't have the decision made, they don't feel like they had a voice, they didn't have buy-in. So generally, you do group meetings. All of us choose to do group meetings. Now, there's a caveat. I do a lot of one-on-one calls and emails, and I'll call someone and say, hey, what's the status of this? I think blah, 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 blah. But it's not a recurring meeting with them owning the agenda. It's me, when I need something, I'll call somebody. So I do meetings, they're recurring meetings, they're group meetings, everyone hears, there's notes taken, it's very transparent what the topic was, what the decision made, who was in the room, who had input. So if the process was unfair in some way, I don't want to say unfair, inadequate, there's at least a record of the process and people can weigh in. And then there's really private communications, calls and texts that I'll do. And that's just partly relationship building, but that will be a 6-minute call, not a half-hour or 1 hour one-on-one where we sit together. So most CEOs that I know started with recurring one-on-ones. And we've kind of moved away from them because of the perils of them, and these are some of the reasons.
But let's face it, this thinking misses the point entirely. Without these regular check-ins, especially in a remote environment, leaders can't possibly know where their employees are struggling or what motivates them. Leaders need to realize that one-on-ones aren't just about checking off boxes or talking about performance metrics, although that is important. They're about understanding employees as people, about uncovering their motivations, struggles, and development needs. Without this, no one can succeed at their fullest potential because leaders are typically managing people as a one-size-fits-all without taking this route. That's why it's important. So, what can we do to fix these problem and broken systems? The first step is to change the mindset from command and control to collaboration and empowerment. When leadership embraces this shift, employees are more likely to feel heard, valued, and aligned with the company's goals. It's simple. Support your employees, understand them, and help them grow. And yes, that means regular, meaningful one-on-ones. It means creating a psychologically safe environment where employees can express themselves and feel secure in their roles. And it means shifting away from outdated thinking that productivity and engagement only come from rigid in-office mandates and policies.
To help people realize their potential, every coach needs to be comfortable delivering feedback. A lot of leaders end up waiting till performance reviews to deliver the unvarnished truth. That comes as a surprise then to their direct reports, who for the last 6 months thought everything was fine. If you deliver a message during a performance review that comes as a surprise to anybody on your team, you have failed at leadership. You have failed to give the feedback in real time so that they can learn from it, adapt, and make an effort at improving. The longer you wait, the harder it gets to encourage people to change, and the less likely they are to even believe your message in the first place. As a leader, I want to build the person up as opposed to tearing them down. A lot of us instinctively try to do that by serving up the feedback sandwich. Let me take a compliment, a piece of criticism, and then another compliment, and that way I can sandwich my critique between 2 slices of praise. Well, guess what? Empirically, the feedback sandwich does not taste as good as it looks. If the person you're serving it to is anxious at all, they're not even going to hear the praise. They're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. If they're pretty confident, they're going to fall victim to primacy effects and recency effects. So they're going to remember the first compliment and the last compliment, and what happened in the middle is just going to get erased from their memory. What's much more effective is to start off by clearly segmenting your domains of praise from your domains of constructive criticism. So I would go into this conversation and say, I want to tell you a couple of things you're doing well and a couple of things that you could work on improving. Do you have a preference for which we do first? I'm not only clearly segmenting the praise from the criticism so that they can realize those are separate things, I'm also then making this a two-way conversation as opposed to a one-way monologue. One of the biggest mistakes that leaders make when they give feedback is they spend too much time judging the person and not enough time trying to focus on behavior change. When you start to tell people what they do wrong consistently, what makes them ineffective or incompetent, you invite their ego to show up. Nothing is going to get through. If you can tell people 1 or 2 things that they could do better, instead of trying to prove themselves, they're much more open to figuring out how they can improve themselves. A study published on this a few years back showed that you can make people significantly more open to constructive criticism just by saying about 19 words before you deliver it. I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I'm confident you can reach them. And you should do that in your own words. That completely changes the tone of the conversation. I'm not attacking you. I'm not judging you. I'm here to coach you and help you grow. It turns out it is surprisingly easy to hear a hard truth from someone who wants to help you succeed. And if I want to reinforce that further and take myself off the pedestal, I'll conclude by saying, is there anything I can do better? Is there something you want me to know about how I can work more effectively with you? And that way we're building a foundation for a better collaboration, as opposed to me just telling you what you need to change. Just like in a marriage, that would probably not work very well if you tell your spouse, it's not me, it's you. As a leader or manager, the same principle applies. If you show a willingness to grow, the other person is a lot more excited about trying to grow with you.
Now, let's not ignore the reality of remote work. As we've seen with companies like Twilio and Airbnb, distributed work is here to stay. But here's the kicker. Remote-first companies are actually outperforming many in-office counterparts when it comes to engagement, retention, and, yes, productivity. The idea that remote work is the problem is simply outdated thinking and wrong. If leadership is truly invested in their people, they'll realize that flexibility is essential, not just for younger employees, but for employees of all ages. They'll see that remote work and hybrid models are actually key to boosting morale, driving engagement, and ensuring retention. Now, to wrap this week's Future of Work Weekly Report up, the problem isn't the office. It's the broken systems that prevent employees from feeling engaged and supported. Managers who don't understand their employees' needs, leadership that refuses to evolve, and outdated practices like micromanagement are all part of the issue. But here's the good news. We can fix it. Leaders need to evolve. They need to prioritize one-on-ones, embrace flexibility, and invest in understanding what truly motivates and supports their employees. That is what really motivates and encourages productivity, engagement, and retention. If we focus on fixing the root cause of the problems, these will follow naturally. Thanks for tuning in to this week's Future of Work Weekly Report. Stay tuned for next week as we continue to dive into the future of work and what leaders need to do to stay ahead. See you next time.